all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast. I'm your host, Dean, joined by the other host, the better host, the man who watches all the movies and makes me feel dumb. David, how are you doing?
I don't know why you would at all say that or insinuate that I have a bigger film knowledge than you do, but I'm flattered by the compliment, Dean. Thank you.
I try my best to be nice on these podcasts. Really, outside of these, I'm a fucking slave driver, you know.
Well, it does feel a little lonely this week, if you catch my drift.
Oh, is there something going on? Are you being sad I'm making you edit in the gulag again?
I've been stuck on an island, and it's so cold here, alone, and I hear something outside the walls.
I wonder if it's the Thing from another world has come
Or
to greet us.
two little girls who seem to hide in the coat closet every time you turn a corner.
So if that doesn't give a hint as to what movies we're talking about this week, we'll be talking about John Carpenter's The Thing and Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And this is actually kind of an interesting episode. I think this is a break from the norm because this isn't a pairing of just two really obscure movies or a big movie and a small movie. This is one of actually this is our favorite horror movies.
Yeah, and it's it's kind of funny that while these are favorites of ours, um, I didn't even realize until watching them this past week that they are both like isolation horror movies, and that's kind of the thing I think we were getting at.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, we've stumbled upon something great. Why don't we dig right into it?
Yeah, let's jump in. Okay, but before we do that, let we gotta point out some fun facts right out the bat because we actually have another first for this episode.
Ah,
This is the first time we've had a director cross episodes. We've had director driven episodes, are a Spike Lee episode,
sure.
which I think was like episode 5, and then not too long ago we did our Terry Gilliam episode. But this
Very
is the
true.
first time a director has been in two separate episodes, and that is John Carpenter, because we did Halloween, I believe, a couple weeks ago, and John Carpenter's The Thing this week.
That is true, and it's especially exciting that we get to explore two heavy hitters and some of their most iconic features. I mean, this is going to be an exciting conversation.
Yeah, especially since this is also the first Stanley Kubrick movie.
The first, but not
Ooh.
the last.
Oh, God.
You have
no.
not heard the last of Kubrick on this podcast.
Kubrick made 10 movies, and I'll be damned, we're going to get through all 10 before we wrap. All right. So let's get into this. David, why don't you give a little brief log line, little brief description to each of these movies? We'll start with The Shining because that's your favorite.
The Shining. A frustrated author brings his family to a secluded mountain hotel for the winter so they can watch over the manor as it takes a hold of them.
Ooh, already makes me feel all
Yeah.
spooked already. But what about The Thing?
The Thing, a team of scientists in a remote Antarctic station seek to destroy the alien skinwalker that has joined the group before it can reach civilization in the spring.
Ooh. I'm kind of excited about these because these are both like super atmospheric horror, and we got a lot to dissect out of both of these.
A lot of shots of empty hallways.
Lots of them. Oh my,
That is
oh
certainly
my
what
God,
I
those
noticed.
empty hallways.
Yeah. But they're certainly good shots of empty hallways, and they make your skin crawl, so to speak. Dean, which one do you want to start with? I'm down for whichever.
I mean, I kind of want to save the best for last. So let's start with The Shining. You know,
Oh, okay.
the
That's
thing's
big
my
talk
favorite.
there.
The thing's my favorite horror movie. And but Kubrick's my favorite director, so I feel like torn right now. But we got to give credit to the master. So let's talk about Kubrick. Let's talk about The Shining. Let's get that out of the way because fun fact, people say The Shining is Kubrick's worst movie, which
Which
is
is
insane.
asinine. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, really. People who say that are named Stephen King and they have no business making movies because I mean, for fuck's sake, can you really think of a movie that Stephen King likes of one of his adaptations that is actually ends up being good?
The Mist, and that's the only one I can think of.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he liked Shawshank and The Green Mile too.
Okay, yeah. There's
But
an
those aren't
interesting.
horror
That's an
movies.
interesting little thing you've pointed out there because Shawshank and Green Mile, of course, are masterpieces, but they're dramas. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not horror movies, and most of the horror, or I guess The Dark Tower isn't so much horror, so you could probably label it along the lines of like a thriller, maybe like a
It's like a sci-fi fantasy epic kind of
yeah,
thing,
it
but
mixes a lot
also
of
the
genres
movie's
together.
really bad.
Yeah, no kidding.
They
But
tried to jam 6 books into one movie. That's where they went wrong.
yeah, I mean, which is funny because you think on the tail end of like the book adaptation franchise movement, you'd want to make another franchise, but go figure. I
Yeah,
guess Idris Elba didn't want to do all six.
Or Matthew McConaughey was like, "I got an Oscar now. Why am I in this bullshit?"
Yeah, all right, all right, all right.
I
Um,
every time they went cut, he's like, "All right, all right, all right. I'm going to my trailer and getting out of this costume. Good
yeah, is there
day."
such a thing as reverse method? Because I feel like that's what he does.
Every character is him now.
Yeah, no kidding. So Deed and I have kind of made a resolution to hmm, not gloss over, but maybe run down the plots a little bit quicker for the sake
Yeah,
of conversation. I'm sure everybody would appreciate that too. While we enjoy our tangents, so we're going to assume that the three of you out there do too.
exactly. And The
uh,
Shining, we're gonna get on a lot of tangents because this is a lot of movie.
right. So why don't we run down this real quick? The story is about a writer named Jack Torrance,
Played
who
by Jack Nicholson.
the iconic Jack Nicholson.
This is back when he was still handsome-ish, kind of. He had that. Okay, he was never handsome, but whatever. He was younger.
He was probably handsome for his day, and certainly has a bunch of charisma to go with it.
Okay, yeah. He
Yeah,
was getting laid based on charisma, not on boyish good looks.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Jack Torrance is tasked with watching over the Overlook Hotel deep in the Rocky Mountains over the winter. It gets snowed in, and they can't allow guests to come. So they ask somebody to come and watch over the hotel grounds, like, upkeep things, all with the promise that they could stay there. Of course, it's built on Native American burial ground, so go figure, nothing to worry about.
They just kind
Uh,
of gloss over that in the movie. I think it's a throwaway line.
yeah, I do think the same thing. The family heads out and they are overjoyed um, to have this opportunity at a long vacation. Jack's wife,
Wendy,
Wendy,
played by Shelley
Jack's
Duvall,
Shelley
who is
Duvall, yes.
the epitome of a living like wash rag. She looks just so distraught throughout this entire movie.
Yeah, I think we're going to end up talking about that delivery a little later and her relationship to Kubrick in a sense. But Wendy
Yeah.
is overjoyed to be able to get out of the house, and their young son
Danny,
Danny. I don't know why
played
all
by
these
a
names are not
character I
coming.
don't know. Hmm?
I don't know why for some reason on the movie that I've seen before I can't remember any of the names. But
Your favorite horror movie, you can't remember a single name.
yeah, and little Danny kind of get to run around while Jack is going to be finishing his book. But of course, as they get to the hotel, things kind of run awry. So the head chef, Dick Halloran, talks to Danny while they're being introduced and shown around the grounds. And Danny kind of
does his
Shows him his little finger
the
friend.
okay, I gotta stop you there. So if you're a father, you have a young son who's 8, right? That's probably how old he is. And he has an imaginary friend that he's talking to by wiggling his finger in this kind of weird voice. You you maybe look into that a little bit, or do you just kind of let the kid have that kind of imaginary friend?
I mean, if I was a violent alcoholic like Jack Torrance, I might not notice.
Oh god.
But we'll get to that.
Well,
Um,
well, we're gonna talk really in depth about some Jack in this movie.
right, we get an ominous warning from Dick to stay away from room 237. Time moves on throughout the movie, and they get into the thick of winter. Jack's writing is going nowhere. Danny and Wendy have been exploring the hotel's hedge maze and the grounds, and Halloran has gone off to Florida, far away from these terrible, terrible grounds because, well, everything starts to go to a mess, I guess you could say, because Jack is continuously being driven more crazy.
Well,
When
he falls way off the wagon too.
Oh, way off the wagon. Wendy is continuing to notice these odd behaviors in her husband. Danny is haunted by a pair of, well, murdered twins,
From the
who,
last groundskeeper, right?
yeah, I believe the last groundskeeper had got to them. That was briefly mentioned in the opening scene, I believe.
Yeah.
That there was some sort of happening that is the reason they're looking for somebody new. Things finally break loose with an iconic scene in which Jack reveals that he has had enough of writer's block. I mean, really, is what is going on.
Yeah.
And Wendy fights him off and begins her escape with Danny, all the while being terrified by Jack's relenting or unrelenting desire to kill his family for some reason. She locks him in the freezer and they get ready to leave, but somehow Jack is released and they are chased away. Wendy is chased upstairs by the axe wielding husband, while Danny makes a break for it.
Well, he escapes into the hedge maze, and that's when we get Jack goes and chases after him or whatever because the ghosts are telling him, he's like, Danny can't get away because he's the fucking Shining.
Right, so it goes the iconic scene where Jack breaks through into the bathroom door
Here's
uh,
Johnny.
is interrupted by Halloran coming back to check on the family after no communication has been established with them. Halloran is brutally murdered by Jack, followed by a bunch of period blood coming out through a elevator. And finally, Wendy makes a break for it out the window into the night after Danny is chased off by Jack. Jack gets stuck in the storm. Wendy and Danny ride away on the slowest caterpillar machine ever, and we cut to black.
That's a lot of plot.
There is a lot of
That's a
plot
lot
in
of
this
movie.
movie. It's a very plot
Uh,
heavy horror movie. It's a very
it's also a very
there's
slow burn.
it's yeah, there's a lot of detail, but I love this stupid movie uh, because I don't know. I think Kubrick has a way of making it work. So why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, like I think we need to just talk about how Kubrick does this movie because like
Yeah,
I've read the Shining novel and it's a good novel. It's fine. It's pretty standard Stephen King fare. Uh, the main character is obviously based on Stephen King, kind of like that experience and him and going through like addiction. That's a
yeah.
lot of what that book's about.
Themes of innocence, especially in focusing on the child character and that trauma.
Mm. It's a lot of
Um,
like father son dynamic and kind of passing on like that abuse to your son, and that's a lot of what the book is, and the movie kind of just gloss like glosses over that.
yeah, famously, there is a disconnect between King and Kubrick's interpretation of the story, though both have been praised for their versions. Obviously, King is the original writer, but then Kubrick's version is a much I
It's a
would say
much
it's a simpler tale in a way, even though it's still fairly complicated. I think there's a lot more focus on this whole domestic violence thing that's kind of going on.
well, the thing is with the Kubrick version is it's actually pretty it's not an exact one for one of the book, which is bad. If you're out there and you're adapting a book, an exact one for one generally doesn't work. We've seen
Yeah,
that with the other Shining film that or the Shining miniseries that I think Stephen King directed.
I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, no, it exists and it's a one for one of the book. And it works okay, but it's like overlong and the atmosphere is like not there and nothing it just doesn't feel like a horror story
Yeah,
anymore.
and I think that's an interesting point when you point out like the feel, because when you're thinking about the two different mediums, which I really think is the disconnect here, King obviously had to write a horror novel versus Kubrick had to make a horror movie. And you're not going to get the same kind of feeling out of your audience if you try to pace it like a horror novel. You have to pace it like a horror movie, which Kubrick does fantastically in my mind. All
Oh
the
yeah.
sequences are put together. Maybe not the whole pace of the whole thing per se, but the sequences themselves are iconic and chilling. I mean, especially his use of camera work, his direction of the characters, all are put together to make this a very fine example of what a horror movie should be.
A lot of this film is just it's super atmospheric. It is like it because it starts and it's so like slow and not slow in a bad way. It's like slow, like methodical.
Yeah,
Like it's taking you by the hand and it's walking you through this hotel. It's walking you through these characters. It's building up that atmosphere. This place is huge. It's cavernous. Like you could get lost in the overlook. You can wander around those halls for hours and there's nothing. If you go outside, it's the same way. It's just miles of nothing. It isolates you, it makes you feel it. And then it's the factor of you're also stuck here with a guy who is really not okay. He's an alcoholic who is getting real close to just already murdering his family, and his wife is just already this kind of beaten down like person, and then there's this young kid involved, and that also brings me to another point. Jack Torrance or Jack Nicholson's portrayal is the biggest reason Stephen King actually hated the this version of the story.
which is fascinating because it's like I just don't get how you can watch this movie and look at Jack Nicholson's portrayal of the character and think it's not somehow genius, you know? Because I mean, literally is one of the most famous horror movie characters now. I mean, this movie is, as we say, mean to death in a lot of different
Oh
ways.
yeah. This is one of the few movies out there where you could say you seen it without ever watching the movie. It's been put through like pop culture so much. It's been so saturated in film and everything else. You can piece together almost the whole movie without actually watching the movie.
Yeah,
How many times have the Simpsons ripped off like The Shining, like bits and pieces of it for like Treehouse of Horrors? I think they actually ripped off the story for one of their segments.
yeah,
Family Guy has done it. I know like Parks and Rec's done it. A bunch of them have stolen little bits and pieces. It's just permeated the culture.
yeah, and it's I don't know. I've never understood why King can at all have so much umbrage for it. It's like maybe it has to do with the fact that it might be a personal story for him. You know, like he mentioned, if he sees himself in it, maybe he's somehow offended or yeah, I mean, I guess straight up just offended by what Kubrick felt he needed to change. But then
Uh,
again, how are you gonna? I don't know. It's weird because I can't really get a sense of why the conflict is the way it is without getting a sense of like what was going on in the year 1980 with Kubrick and King at the same time. You know?
yeah, what was their actual like interpersonal relationship?
Or yeah,
Well,
or how would those two minds kind of meet together and then
I
bounce
mean,
off each other?
I kind of know because I kind of know where King is coming from with Jack Nicholson because Like in my opinion, I think Jack Nicholson was. It's weird because the film overall is fantastic. Like, it's a very good film. Atmosphere, camera work, sound design, and all this, like, it works.
Right.
But Jack Nicholson, he is a fine actor. He does well in the part, but how he chooses to portray Jack Torrance, I have a problem with it, and I think it's the same reason King had a problem with it. Because at the start of the movie, you think Jack probably is going to kill his family anyway. And going to the Overlook doesn't really, he only goes crazy because he sees ghosts, but like the car ride to the Overlook, that awkward car ride where, Jack Torrance is there and it looks like he just wants to murder Wendy and Danny right there.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like he's always on the verge of snapping anyway, and I think that's just because that's how Jack Nicholson decided to portray the character, and how Kubrick wanted him to do it. Is you're portraying this guy who's violent alcohol, or he is a recovering alcoholic. You're kind of violent by nature. You're trying to be a decent husband, but you're kind of shitty at it, and you're an okay dad. And that's basically your character, and you're a writer who is failing at every turn. That's your character. And Jack Nicholson took that in the way of, I hate my life and everyone around me. And King was like, no, you're genuinely trying, and you have these demons that you're fighting against, and you're genuinely a good guy, and the Overlook is corrupting you. And that's the thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's it. There's the arc for Jack isn't the arc for Jack Torrance just isn't really there, and I think that's
But
the thing.
I think that's what this film does, right? I mean, it's not necessarily gospel, but films tend to be more structured in the way they tackle like protagonists versus antagonists. And obviously in this story, Jack Torrance is an antagonist. He's the bad guy. He's the killer. So it's like, yeah, of course he might be
Is he
bound to
though?
be. Yeah, I think so, because what I think is most apparent about why Nicholson and Kubrick came out with this interpretation of the character is that there's heavy themes of fate, I guess you could call it. There's everything kind of seems inevitable from the start, like you said. A lot of how the story is wrapped up seems to point towards the fact that this was in the cards somehow,
Mhm.
even though nobody can really get answers from fate. All they know is that they can recognize it once they realize it. And I think that's what that photo, the famous shot of the
Oh,
photograph at
the
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 end.
final shot where it's Jack and he's at the 1929 party or whatever at the Overlook.
Right, and it seems ominous and spooky, but I really do think there's some sort of like visual poetics going on in which they're trying to say without saying it, like you should do in a movie, that some of these things might be inevitable. Maybe Jack wasn't really a good guy. Maybe these people like him aren't good guys, and that they're long past saving. So in a way, this event in these characters' lives was never going to swing it one way or the other. This just happened to be where the horror story occurred. And of course, then there's all these paranormal happenings that kind of obviously have to be addressed for adaptation's sake and add in certain ways to um, the depth of the story. But what's interesting to me that I've always noticed is it almost seems like the characters can then use those things as an excuse as to why this is happening, rather than, of course, addressing it as Jack Torrance is an abusive, angry, fed up person who is long past his tipping point. Now it's like he can blame himself on being possessed and persuaded by the house, you know, which is huge and looming in its presence and mysterious and
Th-
conniving in the way it tries to torture him into doing its bidding. But who's to say, too, because this is an interesting thing I notice, that the house is even haunted because when are the characters in the same room when anything goes on? They're always alone when something happens, you know?
like that's actually an interesting point, because so the ghost thing. because this has been a point that people have made for years, is like, is in The Shining, are the ghosts even real, or are the characters just going crazy and they're just seeing shit? Because there's never a single point in the movie the ghosts do something that is unexplainable.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
there's, and this is actually very interesting. To go back to Kubrick too, his movies always have this kind of like double. There's like two layers to them always. There's like on the surface and below the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get too like hoity-toity about this guy's mind, because he,
Don't worry. Drinking the pretension juice. It's all
yeah.
good.
I mean, we all know that Kubrick is a perfectionist. He's very particular about his movies.
Oh yes, the guy spent how he made Tom Cruise walk through a door 132 times and Eyes Wide Shut,
Yeah, I mean,
so he could do it naturally.
as you told me, he even went out and designed his own box to store things in. It's like this guy's
That's true.
he's methodical to the purest sense of the definition. And I think that gives him a benefit because it allows him to do and notice these things, which are, by the way, very simplistic when you think about it in a filmmaking sense. Because I feel like in any horror movie, even nowadays, just being in a writer's room or writing the script down, even yourself, you could be like, it might be interesting for the characters to only experience these hauntings while isolated from each other, so that it's almost like you're convinced that they're happening to you, but there's no clear evidence other than that you've experienced them, which is like that. Maybe this interesting commentary Kubrick has on the paranormal nature of the story. And a lot of ghost skeptics would probably say the exact same thing. It's like, well, how do you know it happened? You were the only one that was there.
Honestly, it's kind of interesting because it feels like The Shining is something a kid would come up with to explain why his dad went crazy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wonder if that might be like something to this. Like the Shining in Kubrick's version, it's not the story of Jack Torrance going crazy. It's the story of Danny Torrance trying to reason why his dad went crazy and tried to kill his mom
Yeah.
and him.
And I think I like that explanation because it just further gets to the point of like why we try to justify that these terrible things happen to us. Especially because when you look at the character Wendy, I mean, Jesus Christ, she's the most optimistic
Oh my
domestic
god.
abuse victim I've ever seen.
So, Shelley Duvall, who plays Wendy in this film, she was nominated for a Razzie for Worst Actress.
Which is asinine. I mean, it's just absurd.
This movie was also nominated for like a Razzie for Worst Picture. So,
It's so
bruh, when this movie
stupid.
came, yeah, when this movie came out, no one liked it, which is so weird. Which is the same thing that happened with The Thing, my pick.
Yeah,
They're
and
both movies that when
that's
they
happened
came
to
out,
Kubrick before too. I mean, 2001 was a flop upon its premiere.
I don't think was 2001 a flop.
Yeah,
I know Eyes
at
Wide
his
Shut was a flop.
2001 was a flop upon its premiere specifically because when he was at it, the hoity-toity audience that he invites to his premiere in New York didn't like the film because they were like, "What am I watching?" And then it wasn't until they actually figured out that whole psychedelia campaign that the movie became like a commercial success, and Kubrick was vindicated because
Mm.
he just happened to make it in the summer of '69.
They fucking he nailed it. No, he didn't make it in 69 because he made it in 67. He made it before we landed on the moon.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean though. Like it
Yeah,
was
but it,
released
like
in
yeah, that
'69.
summer of love when LSD was everywhere, man.
Yeah, no
Uh,
kidding.
but yeah, like it's so weird when you think about it because does Shelley Duvall actually give a bad performance?
No, I actually think like think about what these actors do. These actors, like people may think it's over the top, but like if you think about any acting performance, right? A lot of the time I feel personally that some great acting performances are no different from one another because it's just you talk slower, you maybe tear up and cry, you maybe you're saying something like you have a good script behind you, but it's like okay, at what point do you start to address that maybe the full breadth of human emotion can be expressed in acting, and such things as fidgetiness or rage or whatever these other emotions are that this movie expresses can be expressed in a much messier way. And that's what I think it is the actors are, and also Kubrick, who also put them through hell
Oh
performing
my
these things.
God.
I mean, speaking of Shelley Duvall, Jesus
We
Christ.
we gotta address, because I don't know if Stanley Kubrick just fucking hated Shelley Duvall, but he put her through fucking hell.
Well, I don't
He would
think
have been called out in some fucking hashtag.
yeah, I don't think he hates her. It's just like for the nature of, again, how he is. It's like he knows what the material is. He knows how the actors are going to have to do it. So he's going to do everything he can as the director, which he's maybe taking a little too literally here, but he's going to put her through hell because that's what the character's going through. And of course, it creates these real life horror stories about him,
Making her do the stairway scene 200 times.
yeah, and all these things where it's like there were other psychological games he played with her to like keep her high strung and neurotic the whole time.
Her hair started falling out, bro.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
it's fascinating and unfortunate what happened to her, but at the same time, it's like,
It's probably like her best performance.
yeah, I mean, I gotta say, it's like acting. It's like this kind of like film industry fodder that we think about, right? It's acting, quote unquote, but it's just still just we're capturing human behavior. That's all that's going on. You're just labeling it acting because we're playing pretend. So why
Well,
not try and get it as close to the real thing while staying pretend?
that was the thing with Kubrick. So you know how Kubrick used to cast his movies?
No,
He
I'm
would,
actually unaware. I need to read more about him. I mean, after
yeah.
the whole box thing, I was like, Jesus Christ, what else did this guy do?
There's a whole documentary about that box, about those boxes, by the way.
Yeah,
It's like it's like an 80-minute documentary called Stanley Kubrick's Boxes, about the boxes in his warehouse.
right.
But whatever. But because I love Stanley Kubrick, I read a bunch of his like stuff and all that things. And there was a thing where they were like speculatively looking at how he used to cast people, and he would try and cast almost like the neo-realists used to cast, like the Italian neo-realists, where if they wanted a butcher for a scene, they would find a butcher
Yeah,
to play the part. If they wanted a this or that, they would find a this or that to play those parts. And he would try and find actors who were basically the characters. They just needed to be turned up to 11 to hit the mark for like certain emotional stuff. Like Kirk Douglas, he's playing in Paths of Glory. He's playing this commander who's very emotional, and he gets bombastic, and he's yelling, he's trying to defend his people. And that's kind of Kirk Douglas. He's this guy who's very big emotion, and he fucking, like, I don't know if Kirk Douglas had yelling in his contract, because he yells in every movie, but he's fucking good at it.
yeah,
And
or
Paths of
like,
Glory is one of his best performances.
or another famous example of this exact thing is Gunnery Sergeant Hartman from Full Metal Jacket, who was
Exactly.
a actual drill sergeant.
R. Lee Ermey was an actual drill sergeant in Vietnam. I think it was the same year the movie takes place in. Like, he was an actual drill sergeant for the Vietnam War during this exact same year that the movie takes place in.
Yeah, the behind the scenes of Full Metal Jacket, like that is one of the best behind the scenes ever.
Oh my god. Do you know R. Lee Ermey, the guy who plays Sergeant Hartman? He was the second actor to play him. They actually had a different actor learn
Yeah,
all the lines.
yeah.
Oh, you saw the same Cinema Tyler episode?
Well, yeah, well, I've
Yeah.
seen the behind the scenes, so like I've seen Emery being like, I had to convince him to let me play the part and fire the other guy.
Oh man, and the other guy is the gunner in the fucking helicopter.
Oh yeah, the
Who's
scene where
he's
how
he
do you
steals,
do it?
he's- which is crazy because it's really hard to steal a scene in a Kubrick movie because he's so methodical. That guy fucking steals it.
Yeah,
But like that's the thing. That's how he used to cast people. He would just find people as close as possible to the characters and just turn them up a little bit or turn them down a little bit in certain aspects and tune them in. And that's how
Yeah.
he used to do it. And I wonder if that's the thing. He got Shelley Duvall, who, like, she just looks like somebody who has kind of been through it. Because
She has, it's kind of interesting that you bring up her look for a second, because a lot of horror movies try to focus on getting pretty people to play. I think we've already had this conversation
oh
this
my
month.
god, you're still mad, aren't you? You're still mad about pretty people in horror movies.
I'll only say that we know it exists right now, and
Yeah,
not to say that Shelley Duvall's not a pretty person, by the way. I mean, she's beautiful actress, but like she
she has
has
a very unique look.
exactly, and one that I think lends itself to being a more sheepish, mousy person, and I certainly think that you shouldn't be shy in addressing what actors look like when considering them for the part, because just as well, Jack Nicholson has always looked like a I mean, really a homeless man who looks like he's about to snap and stab somebody on the sidewalk. Uh,
Which is why he is the greatest actor to have played Charlie or McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He just looks like a crazy biker in an asylum.
yeah, the only part I think he's ever done that I think was like, which he still plays perfectly, but it's like, wow, I never would have thought to cast him for this type of role, is his role in Easy Riders.
Which is weird because he was like basically unknown at that point.
Yeah,
I think he was unknown at that point. I think he was only in like a couple Roger Corman movies.
yeah, it was very early for him, or as we also, or not, I don't think it was actually that movie, but I seen one on TV a while ago where he was like in this adaptation of Robin Hood or something like this, and he was like super young. It was really weird to see him, because he's always looked old too. That's the other thing, is he always looks like he's been in his 40s, or obviously now that he always looks like he's in his 80s. Uh,
You can tell Jack Nicholson did some hard partying for like 20 solid years of his life.
yeah, which is weird because he is apparently a very mellow person in real life. Like it's not far from who he is on screen. He's a very like, all right, guy.
All right, guy, leave me the fuck alone. I'm
Yeah.
eating.
I can't
got
remember. I've heard some story about when he was in like the Lakers locker room one night, because he's like a
Oh god,
ambassador for the team.
he's had courtside seats for the Lakers since like 71.
Yeah, well, because like now he's like an actual team ambassador or something like that. Like he's a
Oh,
part of the organization just because of how frequently he shows up.
bad fucking ass, dude.
Yeah, but he apparently he just
Also,
like
by
sits
the
in the
way,
corner.
let's go Lakers. Got another ring. What's up?
Yeah, that's true. We got that that super spreader pandemic riot going on in L.A. But
Yeah,
hey, what's a
it's
Lakers
fine.
championship without that sweet, sweet riot?
Bro, like okay, LA is the home of the sports riots. Like that's our thing. All right, that's our claim to fame.
Yeah,
The Dodgers win, we riot. The Lakers win, we riot. The Clippers win, no one cares because that never's gonna happen.
yeah.
But that's what we do.
Um,
Sorry about the Angels, by the way.
well, it's nothing new.
Fucking, we're turning into a sports podcast real quick.
This is
Uh,
a sad sports podcast, if that's what the case. But back to Shelley Duvall and
Shelley Duvall,
this tragic
the
happening on
human
set.
wash rag.
Yeah. It manifests itself into, like we were saying, one of her best performances ever. Probably one of the best horror movie protagonist performances. Certainly one of the most iconic ones. Um, and that even still adds to the depth and texture of the story. That I know a guy like King, who a lot of his, well, we've always seen it from this past, over 2018 or whenever it came out. And that movie gets a lot of like the kind of New England texture that he puts into a lot of his stories.
Because everything in Stephen King's mind takes place in basically small town Maine.
Right. And you can tell like there's an air to which he wants to write these horror stories, but also is trying to write for as wide an audience as possible. So he's going to make it like a little whimsical. He's going to make it so that the characters are all a little aware of what's going on, all these things. And that was obviously how it was in the original book. And well, Kubrick basically was like, yeah, no.
Kubrick was like, read the book. He's like, this is a pretty good book. I'm gonna make
Yeah.
a script out of it. But all this nuance, all this like bullshit about like, nah, fuck this. I'm Kubrick.
Yeah.
I got
You
this.
know, I'd be
Hold my beer.
I'd be fascinated to know what the process of courting King and getting the rights to the book in order to shoot it was. Because the other thing I've noticed about the script, when you mentioned it a second ago, is that some days they were writing it on set.
Oh yeah, that was like the craziest thing because Kubrick, constant fucking perfectionist, and he would do that a lot. So
Yeah.
for The Shining, he would like show up on set like early and they would literally write scenes. I think Jack Nicholson said he stopped reading the script halfway through because the scenes changed every day.
Yeah.
For A Clockwork Orange, when he would show up to do scenes, he would just open up the book, like the book the movie is based on, and would just read the chapter, and then he
Yeah.
would just kind of wing it.
I don't know how you could
What?
do that, dude. You got to be some kind of like. I've
Stanley
long
fucking
suspected.
Kubrick.
Yeah, I've long suspected that he has some sort of. He has this weird sixth sense for how to produce a scene, not just or direct it. And I don't
And
know, it's fascinating. The obsessive compulsion, I think, is a good way to put it.
it's also incredibly weird if you ever see an interview with him, which, by the way, are super rare. There's a couple he did after like 2001, and I think one or two later in life, and he sounds like a guy who runs a bodega in like New York.
Yeah.
He still has like that weird like Bronx New York accent, and he just kind of talks like casually, and the guy just is just chain smoking in every interview I've seen him in.
Yeah,
And
and
it's so weird cuz you're like, bro, you are like the definition of a guy who probably would have just had a C average in high school and probably would have driven truck your life, and you're the greatest, probably the one of the greatest directors to have ever lived.
yeah,
Well,
I'm getting more and more. I got to read up on Kubrick's. Not to say that
background.
it. Listen, we're both student filmmakers, as people probably know in the podcast, and it's not really worth studying your master's upbringing and how they got into the business. More of their work is what you
Yeah.
should be studying. You're never going to make it like they did. But I'm more fascinated by it because I think that it's interesting to be reminded of that relentlessness that he has. This kind of unwillingness to accept defeat at any moment. So he has to make it as perfect and as him as possible.
Oh yeah. And that's the fucking Shining, dude. Like he got the story from King, and he's like, I'm not making Stephen King's The Shining. I'm making Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And I mean, he succeeds. Like, this movie just oozes Kubrick, right? The camera work, for one. Like, we got to talk about the camera work here, because it floats through this fucking labyrinthian hotel on this was it wasn't a dolly, it was a Steadicam. It was like the first movie to use a Steadicam extensively,
Hmm.
right? Am I correct on that, or am I talking on my ass?
Um,
'Cause I think it was. It was either the first or like really fucking early.
well, Steadicam wasn't. I'm pretty sure that wasn't a thing until Goodfellas, wasn't
No, because I want to say, well, I think they used it in Goodfellas, but I'm pretty sure this was like the first major film it was used in, because that's how they got all those floating shots in, or those shots through the hotel when they're following Danny around.
it? Are you
Because I don't
sure?
think it was like a crane or a dolly. I think so. I
Yeah,
want to
I
say.
would check that real quick because I'm pretty sure Goodfellas was the first to do it because that's why the entrance sequence into the Copacabana is so iconic or so famous, I guess.
Well, I'm
At the
looking
time.
it up right now. First film to
I know there was a
ever.
piece of equipment that Goodfellas had used for the first time in that sequence, and I'm pretty sure it was the Steadicam, but I could be wrong.
Oh, okay. So one, the Steadicam was invented in 1975.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so Stanley Kubrick, The Shining, it was the first one to use it for like most of its production. but it was
Fascinating.
used in like the Marathon Man and Bound for Glory and all that other stuff, and some bits in Rocky. But for the Shining, it was almost the entire film was used basically using a Steadicam,
Hmm.
which is, I think that speaks to it because the camera just feels floaty. I is that just me, or is that right? It feels like it's just like floating
Yeah,
in the scene.
I think there is an element to which he did that because um, he wants first of all, it's visually compelling, just the following Danny through the halls. Again, when you can kind of notice in history when a shot is done for the first time and it's meant to wow an audience, which is sad to think about. We really won't get that anymore.
Wait, what?
Well, when you think about it, it's like now with the advent of computer technology, you really can't not think of a shot. Like there's nothing that would stop you from getting a certain shot.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. I mean, there's the ending shot in Roma that everybody is talks about and says it's like no idea how he got it.
yeah,
But
I think there's like the Roma thing is very interesting because that movie feels very much like the ending to 300 Blows, where it's like they go out to the beach and it
or
ends,
400 blows.
or 400 Blows. I don't know, like 300 Blows.
300 blows was the
The
porn mockumentary version.
Yeah, the
I
prequel.
really hope that's not real. By the way, I was just memeing. If
Yeah, I
it
was gonna
is
say
real,
because
drop me a link.
maybe that's just his mom's conception story. Um,
Totes,
but
totes.
so that's what it kind of felt like, and I think there's something interesting to point out there is that Roma was also done practical effects, so it's like we are wowed by the fact that it's real rather than fake, and I mean, directors take notes because that's literally what will get audiences, I think, to be interested in
Hmm.
your films visually. I mean, yeah, we've been titillated by, and not to go on this whole, you know, Martin Scorsese, Disney is a bunch of theme park films thing, because I don't think that either. But
I
after a while, it's like, oh yeah, wow, it's just a bunch of
it,
computer stuff.
yeah, I like okay, because that's the thing. So it's because Stanley Kubrick died in 99, 2000, something like that. So he was not alive when we got this advent of oversaturated like CGI and all this. Like he never saw a Marvel film. He was
No,
never alive for a Marvel film.
he could have seen the Captain America movie, but it would have been a much different Captain America movie.
Yeah, that's the one with like Luke Perry, and it's
Yeah,
different. It's something else.
no
But
kidding.
that's one of those things where if Stanley Kubrick was alive, I wonder if he would be on the side of Martin Scorsese in this. Granted, if he was alive, I think he'd be like 100 years old
No
this
kidding.
year. Yeah, because like no, he'd be like 90 or whatever, and the guy was a 2 pack a day smoker his whole life. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. I think that he might. What I think the middle ground would be for Stanley. Not to say that I'm on first name basis with him.
with the master.
Uh, I feel like there would be an element to which he appreciates the tool, but would still see it as just one of the tools in the toolbox, and that you should still try and go for the real thing because that's evident in what he does in this movie. It's like it should be the real thing. So why aren't we doing the real thing?
Hmm.
I think computers can give you certain things that sometimes you can't get out of practical effects, um, such as that fantastic sequence we got from Color Out of Space. Can't get that with practical effects.
It's
It,
true.
or it'd be like billions of dollars into the hole. But instead, why not just open up some Adobe apps and play with the color effects?
I
Not, I mean, to say it's that simple, but
we've just turned into a Kubrick podcast real quick. But goddamn, it's really hard not to talk about him and his style and his technique
yeah,
in this
because
movie.
and I think it is a good segue to start getting into the next movie we're going to be talking about, The Thing, because I noticed a lot about The Thing, having watched Halloween earlier in the month, that I felt like I knew more about John Carpenter as a director as a result. And it'll be interesting to notice those things because while we've again found this odd pairing in isolation horror films. We're also going to find that Carpenter and Kubrick both took the horror genre and transformed it in ways that people probably didn't think possible for these directors and what they did.
It's really interesting because this is Stanley Kubrick's only horror film. I mean, I mean, 2001 is a horror film.
Yeah,
in sense.
As we've discussed before, I think I'm going to start arguing that 2001 is a cosmic horror film, but that's beside the point.
I would generally agree with that. I think 2001 is one of those films where it's this sci-fi epic, just big, mind-altering, effects-driven odyssey of, humanity, but at the heart of it, it's about a computer going crazy and killing the crew.
Yeah.
It is a horror film. But this is his first go at a pure, just straight horror film. And I think it's the weirdest thing, because I think The Shining has influenced so much of the films that came after it. And honestly, when I think about it, it's like The Shining, it's a great movie, but god damn that. Do you think the praise it gets is deserved in the pantheon of Kubrick films?
Yeah. This is my favorite Kubrick film. So
more than 2001?
Yeah, definitely more than 2001. I mean, I like
More than Full Metal
2001 just
Jacket.
as much as the next guy, and I like Full Metal Jacket, but there's something about this one. Let me paint the scene, because we didn't talk about like when we saw these movies first, but
Yeah, that's probably something we gotta talk about, because that's a big get for both of these movies.
and I think this will explain why it's my favorite. I watched this movie for the first time. I was in the 8th grade. We had gone on vacation to Borrego Springs, California, which is a very out in the middle of nowhere desert town with like 500 people living there. And it was me, my aunt and uncle had taken me and my siblings out there. We got this nice little house, but surrounded by nothing but desert, pitch black night. And a VH copy of The Shining was sitting there, so we were like, well, let's throw it in. This is fun. Have you guys ever seen this before? And we're, as little kids, I say little kids, I mean, I'm in the 8th grade, but
yeah, you're like 13.
I was kind of fascinated, because it was like, oh, cool, a horror movie I get to watch, not just some fucking Disney movie they're gonna throw on. And like scenes like the bathtub scene,
Oh my god.
like the
That
twins being in the
scene.
hallway, the elevator bloodbath. There's just images in this movie that I think are so creative, and albeit based on source material, but still are like burned into your memory, far beyond what I think some of these other films he's done can do. And yeah, that's going up against 2001's psychedelic sequence. That's going up against the iconic bomb dropping of Doctor Strangelove, probably my next favorite. That's going up against Full Metal Jacket. That's going up against a lot of his films, but I still, for some reason, find that this story is so unique in all of his films, because there's some simplicity to it that those other movies don't have, with just these 3 characters stuck in one location.
I can dig that answer. I can really dig that as a reason why you think it's his best movie. Because I'll concede that The Shining probably has the most iconic moments that you can pull from it than the rest of his films. Don't get me wrong, there's iconic moments across all his films.
Right.
But The Shining, there's imagery in this that is so like strange and rich that they burn into your memory forever.
Yeah.
I think everybody remembers the elevator with the blood opening, all that stuff, which Kubrick, being perfectionist, did it 3 times and it cost him $80,000 to reset the set every time.
Yeah.
Here, there's the thing. But yeah, like also those scenes, by the way. So the bathtub scene, that scene to this day still freaks me out.
Absolutely. And all it is just some fucking nasty old woman
It,
getting
it
up
goes
out of
from
the
this
tub.
fucking beautiful woman getting out of the tub to, she's kissing Jack, and then she turns into a fucking hag lady, and it creeps me out. And it goes to Jack Nicholson's performance where he's just fucking looking dead behind the eyes, and oh my god, fucking, ooh, still gives me the chills. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's layers of abstractness. There's layers of which you can take those abstract images and see that Jack is obviously afraid of, like, it kind of feels like it's playing on like his fear of missing out, as to say, of being a bachelor and sleeping around, and then kind of has to face like being in love and having to make love with a raggedy old woman wife now, and
it's like I always took it as he's like afraid of intimacy.
a little bit, yeah. And even still, I think this even goes back to our discussion of that one scene from Reanimator, which is fascinating that we are even comparing Reanimator to The Shining. But
Look, dude, like,
the
movies
level
are
to
great.
yeah, the level to which these practical effects, because it's, yeah, again, completely practical. All it is two actors and some makeup in a creepy bathroom. Um, it feels more real. It feels like you're really in that scene, rather than something more akin to nowadays where we see a lot of computer things, digitally freshened up special effects, and this is, yeah, old men yelling at a cloud, but or young men yelling at a cloud. But
Yeah, you
I'm
know.
just not as scared by those things sometimes because I know they're not real.
It's the thing I think we were talking about in the Terry Gilliam episode, where it's your brain knows it's bullshit, so it doesn't buy it.
Yeah,
Like, if it's practical, like, like a practical effect, it's just like, it might not be real, but God, it's in the scene. Like, the actor's talking to it, they're feeling it. It's there. Like, there's a physical thing there, and your brain's like wants to say it's not real, but it knows it is because it exists
yeah,
in a physical space. Where computers, it just doesn't. Like, you can tell it's the uncanny valley. And I The Shining, just, it's so fucking weird because The Shining, there's what, one jump scare in the whole movie,
pretty
when
much.
when Jack comes out and axes Dick Halloran. That's like the one jump scare.
Well, I guess you might even be able to label the bathroom axing scene as like a jump scare. It has much more energy.
Mm.
But yeah, I can't really think of another one that has that kind of energy. There's even like an element to which he uses some of the scares, but with like what happens off screen too, like with Danny being strangled by Jack. Um, that's a terrifying event, but like we only see the aftermath of it.
Oh, what do you mean? Like when Danny comes in with the bruises?
Oh yeah, well it's not strangled by Jack. He has been strangled by somebody, but
Yeah. I that because I the reason I bring up the jump scare thing is because this movie is scary,
yeah,
right? And it never jumps out to yell at you. It never does. You barely see anything really, but everything just feels so uneasy. Everything feels just off the entire time, and it's just unnerving.
yeah, and it's again why I think this is a scarier movie than some of the. I mean, The Thing kind of does the same thing, where you're uncomfortable the whole time because you're suspicious of everything. Um, and even because I keep harping on this point, and I think it's ultimately the reason I think this is one of his smartest movies. Going back to that scene where I said, Jack strangles Danny. Yeah, Jack might have strangled Danny, but maybe it's Danny says somebody else strangled him because he doesn't want to believe his father did that. Maybe this is the way that Wendy's trying to justify that, no, Jack wouldn't do that to our son. Like, you
There's
don't
somebody else
know.
in the hotel.
Yeah, you don't know because the environment is unsettling, but also the people that you thought you trusted are unsettling.
the the more we talk about it, the more I feel like this movie is about like the movie's about a kid dealing with trauma, with dealing like an abusive parent, and his family falling apart and all this other stuff. Like, okay, so if you were like 8 years old and you had to come up with a story as to why your dad tried to kill you and your mom and went crazy, you was like, the place we were staying at was haunted and ghosts made him do it. That seems like something a little kid who didn't really understand the situation might say. Like, I don't know. This whole movie, there's a lot of like weird underpinnings of it that's just makes you think a lot. Makes you think a lot.
Definitely. But I think that's what Kubrick wanted. You know,
I
he
can
thinks a
definitely say
lot,
that.
so don't underplay your audience. I think that's it. Probably his biggest thing you can take away is never sell them short.
Never assume your audience is stupid.
Yeah. But, you know, you don't have to have too big of a brain to get through this next movie because of how simple the setup of the story is. And I'm not saying
Ow.
it's not an insult to the story, but really, when you think about it, it's genius how much Carpenter can get out of one location for an entire movie and how disgusting it is. So we'll get to The Thing right after.
This. Ba-da-na-na-na.
Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Ah, great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? No, never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're gonna need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay, now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money, so we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're gonna need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No, listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. And we're back to talk about John Carpenter's The Thing, a remake of The Thing from Another World from like 1950 something.
Right.
Yeah. This is
which is interesting when you think about it that way. I didn't even consider that there is an original horror movie monster, The Thing.
Oh yeah. This is it's based on a story called Who Goes There from like 1920 something.
Right.
Which is incorrectly credited to H.P. Lovecraft. He didn't actually write that story. But then it was adapted into a movie called A Thing from Another World, which I've seen, and it's okay. It's like a Monster of the Week B movie thing you would watch like on TV back in like the 50s and 60s. And then John Carpenter was like, I'm gonna make, the best horror film of the last 80 years real quick. Hold my beer, but guys. Same.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I think he's certainly Carpenter here outdid himself with this one, I really gotta say.
Yeah, because you were not too hot on Halloween, if I remember right. Yeah, you had your issues with it.
Probably no different from what anybody else would have had issue with it. It's Halloween. It's a little hokey. Yeah, that's what you expect out of it. But this was like, well, and it's common knowledge that this is a historic movie in the genre.
Oh yeah, this movie is the benchmark for practical effects.
Absolutely. I mean, and is so because we have this very interesting little plot, which we'll run through real quick.
Yeah. Just give us the quick paragraph rundown of the plot.
Right. So we're in Antarctica, and the movie opens on this Norwegian helicopter pursuing a sled dog across the frozen tundra. The dog is running towards an American scientific station, something like this.
It's a research base. I think it's like a weather base or something like that.
and the Americans all pile out as soon as they hear a rifle being fired from the helicopter. Obviously, from the get-go, you sense there is something wrong with this interesting little image, especially when the helicopter is then shot down.
No,
Or
it's not
no,
shot.
wait, it touches down. Yeah,
Yeah,
there is an explosion, but
it touches down, and then the guy with the fucking stick of dynamite or whatever fumbles it inside the fucking helicopter, and he bails out, and it explodes.
yeah. And so both Norwegians are killed before any of these scientists can figure out any of what is going on. One of which is played by well, you could probably call him the main star of the film,
Mister
Kurt Russell,
Mister Kurt fucking Russell.
which is such an interesting performance in this. He plays McReady,
McCready.
who
Come on, man. You
McCready,
don't have
yeah.
to insult my movie by getting the names wrong.
His name is spelled exactly like McReady.
Right.
Either way, McCready is kind of our main character who we will follow, especially because he was probably the most expensive actor to get.
You would think.
McCready goes along with another one of the doctors to this base where the helicopter probably had come from that has since been abandoned and burned out, and they come across some interesting remains that have been warped and burned like beyond recognition, really, and some clues that'll lead them to find what had happened to these men. Of course, when they get back to base, things have already gone awry as the sled dog that had showed up at the base along with this Norwegian helicopter, well, it has infected everything. I mean, it starts off in the dog kennel and gets as far as infecting everybody else as they slowly learn that this skinwalker among them from outer space has come to infect the rest of humanity after it has been uncovered under the frozen Antarctic ice. So now McCready and the boys are tasked with keeping the monster in the base before spring comes and it can get to the rest of civilization, or before it can get to the rest of them. But how easy is that, Dean?
Oh God, it's so good. Oh, the paranoia in this movie is palatable. All right, because
it is fantastic.
Everyone's a suspect.
Like, you bring up this thing about Carpenter and Halloween, right? Mm-hmm. Which, like we said in that episode, all it is really is just a what if story. What if somebody had escaped from a mental hospital and wanted to kill a bunch of babysitters? Go figure.
Yeah.
The movie writes itself.
It's a slasher flick.
This movie, you can tell, writes itself. I mean, all you have are characters, a location, an antagonist in the form of an unknowable, unshaped
monster.
Yeah, if you can even call it that. I mean, it's the most disgusting movie monster, I think, in all of Hollywood's lexicon, because the like you said, practical effects used in this are the best.
Can we get a French kiss on this one? Just a French kiss. Oh, it's so good. Everything in this movie looks so good. Because
which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it's like from an era of filmmaking when it's really not supposed to.
Yeah, because this movie came out in what, 80, 82, something like that?
Yeah, early 80s.
Yeah, and this wasn't filmed at a set, which like blows people's minds a lot of the time. It wasn't filmed on location. They didn't go to fucking Antarctica. I think they went up to like the northernmost part of like Alaska or Canada or something like that and filmed it there.
Which makes sense because those mountains wouldn't really exist in Antarctica. But
it's pretty flat in Antarctica.
But it's certainly still like that opening sequence is breathtaking with some of the shots they get, especially with like this action of the helicopter and then the guy trying to shoot. It's like it catches your attention from the get-go.
Oh yeah, I think that's the thing. When John Carpenter, because we saw John Carpenter when he didn't really have a budget with Halloween. That's the whole thing but John Carpenter is the most resourceful filmmaker I've ever seen. And then he actually has a budget for The Thing, and it's like, this is what you can do when John Carpenter has a lot of money behind him.
Right.
Money and studio support, which is the two big gets you really want as a director, is the, studio to just not give a fuck about you for a little bit
Yeah.
and gives you a bunch of
And
money.
star power, too. I mean, Kurt Russell in this movie is like Kurt Russell, unlike anything we've seen him in before or after, really.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think before this, he was only known for like the Disney Channel or like the Disney movies.
that, and then like other than this, let me take a quick look through his filmography real quick. I'm actually interested to know a little bit. I mean, obviously he's made his appearances in Escape from New York and the Escape movies.
Yeah, which John Carpenter films.
Right. He has made appearances in some Tarantino films.
Oh, well, I'm
Um,
talking about up to this point for The Thing. Because I'm
Yeah,
actually wondering how expensive he would have been for The Thing, to be honest.
maybe not so much. I mean, he Escape from New York had come out a year prior, so
Yeah.
that was kind of his big hit. He hadn't done Big Trouble in Little China yet, so
Oh, God,
go figure.
I can't wait for us to talk about Big Trouble in Little China. That's oof.
Yeah.
This movie's great.
Escape from LA hadn't come out yet, which is probably another one of his biggest
Yeah. Well, Escape from New York was
movies.
huge. And
Oh yeah.
I think it's just like Snake Plissken is just like a great character. And I think that's
He
a big one.
apparently had done an Elvis biopic.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No,
Yeah.
and that had come out a few years prior, and no wonder I've never heard of it because it's probably not good.
I mean, it's Kurt fucking Russell playing Elvis, man. It's probably pretty decent.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, like I can't imagine he was like, I don't know if Kurt Russell would be an A-list actor when the time The Thing came out. I don't know if would you ever consider Kurt Russell like A-list actor?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would consider him to be like the A-list action actor on the level of like Kurt Russell. I think is the one of the A-list action actors of the '80s, like how Bruce Willis was one of the A-list action actors of the '90s. Like how
I got you.
kind of like how nowadays, like he almost feels like The Rock feels nowadays.
Oh,
where
I don't know if I go that far, because I
Well,
think Schwarzenegger is closer to like The Rock. If we're talking like in their era.
I think it's like the Schwarzenegger had his stuff, but I feel like The Rock has good comedic chops, like how Kurt Russell does, and also the ability. Well, I don't know if The Rock has totally an ability to get dramatic.
Well, I'm talking about star power here, because I think I can I can rock with that. Like at this point, he probably feels like at the same career point as Bruce Willis was for Die Hard. Because up to that point, I think Bruce Willis was only known for like moonlighting, like some comedies and stuff like that. He wasn't really an action dude. And with Kurt Russell, at that point, he was, he was the Disney kid. He was in like the computer that wore tennis shoes. He was in, that Elvis biopic. He was in Escape from New York. And
yeah, some other notables are The Strongest Man in the World. The one and only genuine original Family Band in 1968.
He was a child star. He was a teen heartthrob idol, and then he kind of became an action dude with John Carpenter, and then The Thing. Like honestly, he was probably not that expensive to get for The Thing, if I'm really thinking about it.
No, because I do also think that this is Scorsese and De Niro. It's these two guys who just get each other and they act in all the movies they need for each other.
You want to know a fun fact? When Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Ray Liotta came over to Martin Scorsese's house during Goodfellas, Ray Liotta said it was the strangest thing he'd ever seen in his life, because Martin Scorsese's mother talked to Robert De Niro like he was like Martin Scorsese's friend coming over to play baseball while they were filming Goodfellas. And I was just,
Because
it's just
that's
weird.
that's what it is. They're all in the family, dude. They're all in the little Italy, and
It was all just hanging out, shooting shit.
yeah. I just gotta stir the sauce for another hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, there is a kind of a reason we're sticking on fucking Kurt Russell a little bit because this is an ensemble film. And he's probably the biggest name. It's like him and Keith Davis, who plays
Yeah. Who
Childs,
Childs?
and
There aren't. Yeah, I guess a lot of
Wilford
big
Brimley's another
names.
one.
That's true. That's
Mr.
true.
Diabetes himself.
Is TK Carter in anything that I would recognize? He seems kind of recognizable, but I don't
It's
know.
one of those things where a lot of these actors were probably in like a bunch of movies in like the late 70s and 80s, and you just
Yeah.
never knew their names.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like, because the other thing you said about this being ensemble is that all of them, I mean, it's a really wide cast of characters when you think about it, and it shouldn't be. It kind of is necessary for the plot, but then it's like also each character ends up having a very unique personality to them
Yeah.
that really helps the story. Um, you could maybe argue that like the two scientist old man doctor characters are a little bit too much the same, but I think they end up having key differences in plot elements.
It's also really interesting how the economy for the characters work because we're not with them for very long, but we learn just enough about them to say, okay, Clark, he has no lines in the movies, but we know he likes dogs, he's quiet, and he likes to keep to himself.
Yeah,
Childs, he's kind of a dick. McCready, he's a loner, he's a drunk, and he doesn't like to be around people. You know, Wilford Brimley, he's Wilford Brimley. He's there you go. He's got diabetes. And, you
right.
know, and that's the thing. We don't really spend a lot of time with each character, but we know just enough about each one of them to identify him in a crowd.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good economy in the character work.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting that you say identify because I think what really caught my eye in when the characters have to really start to get into the thick of the conflict is that you notice more about the personalities because you're trying to suss out, is this the alien or is this a genuine portrayal of who I know this person to be?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what is like so hard to suss out about it's Dr. Blair that is the one that goes crazy, right?
Yeah, Blair goes crazy. Yeah, he's what happens is he runs the simulation and realizes that
Yeah,
if this thing ever gets to the mainland, it would infect North America in like 2 months.
right, because he just happens to have this like Oregon Trail-esque simulation tester that can like come up with graphics
That
that look like a video game.
Yeah, okay, that's actually one of those crazy things. They had to make that for the movie. The technology to render that didn't exist.
Of course they did, because
It's in
it doesn't make
1982.
any
Yeah,
sense.
I know. Some things
But
don't make
yeah, I get
sense.
it. It is. I think that shot for me dragged a little too long, but I get why visually it makes sense. Like you got to show to the audience like this is what's going to happen. I also think you could add some sort of like how probably in an earlier B horror movie that had a computer somewhere in it, there's a nerd pulling out the like long strings of data from the computer printer and going, "Look at these!
Oh
Look at
God.
these!"
Just really
That's kind of
lean into that shit. Oh
yeah.
man.
I feel like he could do that sort of thing where it's like you see the numbers going on the screen and it's just the more and more they show up. But I get it.
Hmm.
You want to also show this very weird image on a computer screen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's very 80s because we're looking at it from 40 years on and we're like, yeah, computers don't work like that, bro. But I mean, granted, in 82, people probably saw that and were like, bruh, that thing's gonna eat the planet. Also, did you see that shit? That thing was like in Star Wars, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of the thing that's going to eat the planet, I kind of want to go one by one because obviously the thing that this movie, I mean, so to
Yeah.
speak, that is the thing this movie is most famous for is obviously those practical effects.
Yeah, that's one of the things that this movie is probably why it's still talked about today en masse is the effects are the reason you want practical effects because they're so good in this movie.
They're insane. I mean, for what I feel like you would be able to do with, because they use, silicone stuff, they use tearing
Latex.
apart dummies, probably a lot of molds. The weight to a lot of the props is very interesting to me, and like the one thing I especially noticed is, so for example, in the scene where can't remember who it is, but somebody like comes down ill, and they're on the table, and then like the
Oh,
head severs.
yeah, yeah. So the guy, he's like, he has like a heart attack or whatever. Like, has a heart attack, and he's giving, and the doctor comes in and is going to basically put the defibrillators, the paddles on the guy's chest to revive him. And he goes in, and this thing's chest opens up like teeth and bites the guy's arms off. And
Yeah,
then they
yeah,
hit him with
because
the
that's
fucking
the other
flamethrower.
doctor that,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's like the medical doctor. Yeah.
Dr. Copper, I believe it
Yes,
is.
yeah, Copper. Which, by the way, fucking he bit his fucking arms off. Like, I don't know why. That was just what the hell.
It's an awesome image.
It.
Like, it's fucking shocking. But
Oh yeah.
then it's like that scene, in that scene when the head severs and like the skin is all like flappy and gelatinous. You don't think about it, but like with computer generated effects, they probably would have made the skin seem a little bit more
Tight.
leather like, and like more like there would be more weight to it. But when I really think about it, it's like, wow, it probably would be that gelatinous and flappy and
If
disgusting looking.
Yeah, if you got your arms bit off by a fucking thing stomach, probably look pretty nasty.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, when I know the big part about that scene that everybody goes to is the head. When the head falls over and it grows the fucking legs and
Oh
oh
yeah, and well, that is one thing that I think the movie probably could have avoided, is trying to give some sort of shape to the monster.
mhm.
I think that the most interesting part about it is that it takes the idea of the skinwalker and then makes it, first of all, I'm fascinated by the fact that this monster can somehow engineer a spacecraft, let alone come from a society where that kind of technology would exist. I can't even imagine what that society would look like. I mean, it's maybe that's part of like the whole kind of slight cosmic horror to it, is that you can't even imagine what this thing is. But
You also have no idea what it's thinking either, which is really weird because
yeah, there's a level to which it's predatory. It does feel literally like the predator, in the way that it tries to operate within this group in order to get to civilization. Um, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you also wonder why the motivation is to kill everybody at the station first before leaving.
well, I don't know if if its motive is to kill everybody. I think it wants to infect everybody. I think that's its motive. It wants to spread, but it can't do it um it can't do it quickly, kind of thing. I
Yeah,
think it needs some time to like spread, and it knows that these guys don't want him or want to be infected. So it has to play it cool. And I think that's the thing. It's you're always like super suspect of everyone in the movie with that knowledge when you're like, "Oh, everyone could anyone in this room could be infected and it's just a matter of time before they break."
that's true, because a majority of the infections too take place off screen, and maybe that's part of it, is that it's methodical in that way so that it doesn't come into danger. That's not a bad point. I like to think of it that way. Well, I don't like to think about it that way. That's
Oh
terrifying.
yeah,
But
where it's something where it's this you want it to be this primal beast with no reason, but you're like, "No, it's very methodical in what it's doing. It knows exactly what it's doing, and that's more terrifying. You almost just want it to be
yeah.
mindless."
Um, the other scene that is obviously important to talk about is the dog kennel scene,
Oh,
which is
You
disgusting.
love that scene. Don't even lie to me.
Yeah. Or just when it's like when it goes into the roof is just like, dude.
That scene is probably why everybody's like, "Yo, dude, like, did you watch The Thing? Dude, just watch the dog
Yeah,
kennel scene. That shit's fucking weird. It's great."
I don't know. It's
Because so what it is in the movie for those who can't don't remember it or haven't watched it or whatever. So this dog thing's in the kennel and it's starting to like transform and it's gonna try and infect and absorb all the dogs in the kennel, and there's like 8 dogs or whatever. And it's spraying its weird like, thing fluid to like infect everything, and it's also transforming and it turns into this giant monstrous mass of flesh and bone and organs that's all these different dogs just fused together. Like imagine you got a thing of like fleshy Play-Doh and just slapped that on the counter and just jammed dog parts in it. That
yeah.
yeah,
It like if the Play-Doh mixed with some pretzel sticks
and just covered
and
in slime.
yeah, and some strawberry preserves in
Oh
there.
yeah,
It's disgusting. It's a mess.
and it's
And what's
great.
funny is like I don't know why computer effects seems to be a theme for us this episode, but like there's obviously been a remake of this movie, and I
Yeah.
saw that. That was actually I've seen the remake before the original, and I can't remember exactly partially because I think it was making out most of the movie,
Good
but
on you, by the way.
just got to drop that in there.
He's like, I got game. What's up?
As if that at 24 years old is what I should be taking pride of. No. Um, I can't remember if there was a distinct difference in the way that they did the monster. I actually think you see less of it in the remake, which is interesting when you think about it. It's like,
I don't know if
what?
that's true actually. Cuz I
Really?
don't know. Well, cuz I saw the remake, but you might be right. Like the monster might be on screen less in the remake, but I think when it is on screen, it's like more bombastic. Cuz I remember there's one scene where it's in like what is it? It's in like this room with all these like big fluorescent lights, and it's like running around chasing this girl. And it that scene goes on for a little bit of time. But I mean, in the original, there are definitely more set pieces where it's set up where you see the thing in its, you know, monstrous glory. But yeah, but I mean, also the remake of the thing is kind of a yikes. When did that movie come out?
Yeah, it's
2016?
it's definitely not as good. It came out in 2011.
2000, oh fuck, 2011. Jesus Christ. But yeah, so that if you're gonna watch The Thing, watch Sean Carpenter's The Thing from like '82, because the remake is pretty bad. Because it's supposed to be a prequel that takes place on the Norwegian base, but it's like a half-ass reboot.
Yeah, so I'm actually watching a clip of it right now. Um, and the interesting thing that I notice is that obviously tentacles are a big part of the
The Thing.
the use in the original, and this in this scene they're using a tentacle, but it's like so for example in the scene where they try to defibrillate the guy and then the arms are eaten, you notice when like the thing throws out its ropes and to try and grab onto something, there's a lot of like
Yeah.
there's a lot of sound effect behind it
Hmm.
that almost makes it seem cartoonish, but then you're like, oh, well, I mean, I guess it's kind of accurate to the
Yeah,
sound.
it's whipping around these like tentacle things.
And because there's hundreds of these tentacles coming out of it,
Mm.
and they're disgusting, and they look like. What's interesting is they almost feel like what you would look at it and see as a bacteria, a piece of bacteria under a microscope, like those like tendrils or whatever they're called, those little hair-like follicles that help them move around.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. And in this clip, there's just one kind of tongue-like tentacle that's whipping around, and there's still the sound effect, but it's like because it's just the one, it's just a little bit like,
Not
well,
there.
why one? I don't know. There's something about like the excess of the practical version of the monster that makes it even more disgusting and terrifying because instead of being completely methodical about how it's transforming and everything. It almost seems like it can't control it itself.
Mhm.
It seems more biological, you know.
It's one
It
of
seems like the movie takes into account the fact that there's a whole bunch of like cellular division going on with transforming, and then it can get caught in the middle of it, like they find out in the one of the dissection scenes.
it's one of those things where this thing is incredibly methodical and thought out and it knows what it's doing, but when it's backed into a corner, it acts like an animal, where it just lashes out wildly, trying to just get something.
Yeah,
And damn, ooh, so good. Love that shit.
very good.
Very good.
Um, Another one of my favorite scenes is so we have this scene where fuck, I lost my train of thought while also trying to think of my favorite scene.
Oh, don't worry about it. We're always losing trains of thought on here. But
Yeah. Why don't you what's your favorite scene of this movie actually? Because you speak very highly of it, and I'm interested to know.
I love this movie to death, and my favorite, I have two favorite scenes. One of them is just a really quiet character moment, and the other one is the first time we actually see somebody transforming. So my first favorite scene is McCready. It's like our first introduction to him. He's playing the chess game, and he's like, I got you. I finally beat the computer, and then the computer's like, knight goes to b7, checkmate, and then he pours his like glass of scotch in the machine, and the machine breaks, and he just says cheating bitch and leaves. That
Yeah,
is just
that
such
is
a
funny.
good like character moment, and it's funny, and Kurt Russell is just great. I just love that
Yeah,
scene.
I like it because it's just so cynical. Like it doesn't. The comedy isn't trying to entertain you. It's actually just trying to be like this shit sucks. We all know this
Yeah,
sucks.
it's one of those things where it's like, dude, this guy is alone on an Antarctic research base with only men for like 6 months at a time. Yeah,
Yeah.
you would do this too. And it's so good. I just love that. I love that sarcastic nature. I love that like cynicism. I just like how Kurt Russell delivers the fucking like line. It's just good. I love that scene. And my other favorite scene, it's the first time somebody walks in and the thing is transforming somebody, and they go be like, "Hey, something's wrong with fuck, what's the red-haired guy's name?" He's like
Oh,
I keep forgetting his name because there's like 12 actors in this film.
yeah. I have the cast of like the just the Google cast of characters pulled up, but it's all a bunch of different pictures of them.
Oh yeah,
Um,
is it Blythe, or is that even a real character in this movie, or am I just?
let's see. There's Palmer, Vance,
Oh, it
George.
might be. It's not Palmer. Ah, fucking.
Windows is one of them. Fuchs.
Okay, I'm bringing it up because I'm gonna recognize his face.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
not
I
Gary
think
because
it's
he was one of the older
Fuchs.
gentlemen.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's Fuchs.
Yeah.
So he gets transformed, and everybody runs to be like, "Hey, something's wrong." And they run outside and they see him, and he's running into the tundra. And they stop him before he runs out there, and he's just standing there, and they're like, "What the hell?" And he turns, and his hand is still like halfway transformed as this like weird tentacle like claw
Oh
thing,
yeah.
and he just opens his mouth, and this alien like roar like screech comes out, and they light him up with the flamethrower. And that's the scene where they're all standing around, and they're like, one of us is the thing, one of us could be this thing right now, could be you, could be me, could be anybody here. And it's like the whole point where it becomes real, when it's like you get the horror isn't the thing, it's the paranoia. It's this, we see this, great practical effect with the guy's hand and that sound and that all that tension and all the atmosphere of that moment. I think it's just such a beautifully composed moment, and even how it's shot is just super off-putting, with it just cutting around to everybody in the room, and you're not sure who's who. And well, actually they're standing outside, and you feel the cold in the air right then because the wind's kicking in,
Yeah.
you see the snow. I just think it's such a good scene. But yeah.
Yeah, that is a really good, like the use of sound in that to really heighten the visuals too is really good.
Sorry,
I
I
think one
ran
of
on
my
about that, but yeah.
a couple of my favorites in particular are like another character moment for McCready is the when he's recording himself to like have something to leave behind in case everything goes wrong.
Oh
Like that
yeah.
moment when he says something and then like stops the recording to record over it. That's I like that a lot because I thought that was a really good way to just kind of. It's a little cheesy. The lighting is a little blue and like set like in that
Hmm.
moment, but um, even still, I think Russell has a really good way of just subduing himself in this movie, where he could be over the top in other things. I think in this one he finds this kind of subtleness that's really good for the character.
I think Kurt Russell's actually like a really good actor, and it's kind of weird that he doesn't get a lot of credit in more of his movies
Yeah,
because I think he does
I
a
agree.
great job in this film.
Absolutely. I don't know. It's like who knows what I mean. It's probably because of the action stigma, really, what it is. But like he does have this like this I don't know. There's just something about it where I feel like this is
You
Kurt Russell could be this guy, and like the beard, and he's so quiet all of the time. I knew really he probably has less lines than some of the other characters in this movie. Um, Yet he really commands the story from beginning to end, and especially because the some of the other scenes I really enjoy are like the ending, particularly the ending scene for me is very
Oh
good
yeah.
because it's like a child shows up and he sits down next to him and he's like it just poses the question back to you as the audience member without even needing to say it out loud. Are either of these guys, can we even trust McCready, like who's to say at this
Oh,
moment?
we gotta bring up that ending scene and kind of explain it because it's the end of the movie. They blow up the research station because they find out the thing is building a spaceship to fly off or whatever. So they burn.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little ridiculous. Whatever. Wilford Brimley climbing into
it,
a
it
flying saucer.
it's a little ridiculous, but at the same time, it's like if it had the technology to do that thousands of years ago or whenever it came, like
You could
I
probably jerry
guess,
rig something, but
especially out of a helicopter. I mean, like go figure, bro.
yeah. And they blow up the base, and people die fighting this thing and all this stuff, and it ends, and the base is burning, and McCready kind of collapses in a burned out like shack, and he's just next to the fire, and then Charles shows up, and they're like, Charles, where were you? And he's like, I got separated in the explosion. And McCready's sitting there, and they just both kind of collapse and sit down, and they're just staring at each other, and it's the fire's gonna burn out before rescue shows up. What are we gonna do to stay warm? And McCready's like, guess we're just gonna sit here and see what happens. And oh my god, the fucking tension in that scene is just insane. Where you half are waiting for one of them to just move at the other one to just become the thing to just attack.
Yeah, because like the other thing I really like about that scene is it almost felt like Carpenter might have even not have known how to end the movie. You know, like how do you end this type of story? I'm not saying it's his fault either. I'm saying like literally the depth and conflict in the story. How do you end it satisfyingly for the audience? Well, you don't. I think you just leave it up to them to be like,
You
you'll never
you
know.
leave it open. You leave them open to think about it for the next fucking 40 years, being like, is it Childs? Is it McCready? Were either of them the thing? Are both of them the thing? Does the thing
Yeah,
know if another one of them is also the thing?
because who's to say even what is? I wouldn't even know what the scariest outcome there is. Like, what if neither of them are the thing and it's somewhere around the camp and they're both gonna freeze to death and it'll just have to wait out through the winter to get through to spring. I mean, you never know.
Oh,
But yeah, when that shot pulls out at the end, I'm like, damn,
you're like, this is fucking bleak. Fucking love that shit.
yeah. But I like that. It's like they don't pull the punches.
Oh yeah. And that's the thing. Like I think John Carpenter just does a great fucking job in this film with that. And we talked a lot about the camera work and the direction for The Shining. Let's talk a little bit about it here because I I think this movie is directed masterfully. And this is another movie that got a shit ton of Razzies when it came out because people thought this movie was terrible. They thought it was the worst movie of the year. They thought the score was terrible. Ennio
I could,
Morricone got a Razzie for this score.
which is insane because like I can't think of a bad thing about this movie. I really can't. Like this movie is solid from start to finish.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the Shining. Like even like any minor gripes you might have with it, it's just like it still works. It still works for the movie.
Yeah, it doesn't try to be something it's not.
That
I don't know. There's
it's
just
true.
there's no point at which those like you could probably say that the taking those special effects of the monster seriously could be seen as cheesy, but really it's not. I mean, it's disgust. He just takes it and makes it disgusting and inhuman and never overdoes it. I love that too. That it's not that it's about what you don't see.
It's also
Um,
lit in a way so you never see how fake anything looks. Everything is always like it's kind of dark and shadowed, and everything looks real and it's unnerving.
yeah. Or then too that he uses the silence and the emptiness of parts of the base to his advantage to really get you to understand the loneliness and the isolation. Because really, when you think about it, it's like a movie like The Martian is obviously, if we're thinking about places that are secluded, is very obviously one way in which you can visualize that there's nowhere to go, that you're stuck here. But in this case, it's like there's a little bit of you that should be able to believe that, oh, these guys could probably find radio or something. No, they are stuck here. They are dunzo. Like this is
Storm's coming
an
in. You're
inhabitable part of the planet. It's this is it.
Storm's coming in. You're gonna get blocked off for at least a month before anybody can even get to you, even if you're radioed.
Yeah. I don't know. And you know, one other thing that I was thinking about while watching this movie, um, the monster kind of reminds me, even though I know he comes a little bit afterward, but there's a little bit of. Does it remind you at all of David Cronenberg, like
Oh,
in the way the body horror is used?
speaking of
Obviously,
which,
Cronenberg, he probably uses more visuals than this movie does, but
I watched Videodrome the other day for the first time, and
yeah.
I've seen the thing, or I've seen David Cronenberg's The Fly before, but I was
Hmm.
watching it, and that actually brings up a good point because I think David Cronenberg is a big practitioner of practical effects, using that to warp the
He's the
human.
body
He's
horror
the
guy,
body
yeah.
horror guy. Yeah, warp the human body, make you afraid of your own body, make you afraid of what your body can do, what it can look like, how it can change, how it, you know, can just not function right. But it's very weird. But it does remind me a lot. Like I would think that Cronenberg probably really digs The Thing because it makes you afraid of like this weird organism that's like this fleshy thing. It's not, it's like it's human, but it's not human. It becomes human and changes
Yeah.
your humanity. And I would imagine that Cronenberg probably saw The Thing and was like, oh, finally somebody who speaks my language who's afraid of puberty.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, it's weird because I know he'd done a few movies before this. I know there was probably zero crossover between the two as far as having inspiration.
Maybe
Well, I don't.
I don't
I
know.
should say zero, but like maybe it was like you said, where he probably had seen this movie and was like, "This is exactly what I like." Um, but I don't think it would have affected his work in any significant way.
Maybe not.
I mean,
He
he
might have taken the name of the special effects guy.
maybe so. I mean, I would definitely hire this guy in a lot of different movies. I mean, I would hire this guy to do something that didn't have to do with severing somebody's head and having the tendrils come out from the neck.
I mean, I the effects guy, I think his name is Rob Bottin, Rob Bottin, something like that.
Yeah,
And that guy's got chops. I think he helped do the effects for Star Wars, or I think he's one of the Cantina singers in Star Wars.
Oh,
Like no meme.
oh,
He did, yeah. I think he did the mask and stuff like that for all the Cantina stuff.
well, that's fun.
Yeah. So like this guy's got fucking pedigree,
Yeah, that's definitely a story I would tell.
right? He's like,
But
what have you done? I was the Cantina. I was the jazz singer in the Cantina scene in Star Wars. You're like, all right. I guess you won. You won this one-upsmanship game. Good day.
yeah,
Hmm.
is Lucas really that short in person? Um,
That the world needs to know.
yeah. Uh, I don't know. It's the thing leaves you speechless, and I feel like even though that doesn't help our podcast, that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. Is like a really
It's one of those things where
I
it's
don't know
like
why
you
I
want to experience.
underestimated this film so much. You know?
I mean that's kind of a thing. I think a lot of people underestimate the thing because it's just it feels like it should just be a pretty cheesy 80 horror movie, actiony kind of movie.
Yeah.
It feels like it should be a popcorn movie, but there's a lot of shit going on. I don't know.
Why don't we get right into this? Like
The
wrapping it up
comparison.
because because I'm a little
You're having a
I
crisis,
don't
aren't
know.
you?
I think it just makes me want to watch the movie again. I guess is where I'm left with, and I think it that way. I will immediately kind of give my recommendation, like go watch The Thing, because the nature to which Carpenter can take this simple premise and make it something that you're totally enthralled by for you just an hour and a half, or I think this movie's like an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah. I
Um,
think it's like 20 minutes shy of The Shining.
yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's just he balances some kind of highball thoughts with some
B movie
very
aesthetic.
commercial, yeah, B movie aesthetic, but then brings it to this commercial Hollywood stature with these great set pieces and visuals. I don't know. It's just a very well balanced movie.
Honestly, like that's the thing. I saw this movie when I was 18 and I dug the shit out of it from moment one, which is
Yeah,
weird because like I saw a bunch of horror movies and I but this movie fucking is amazing. And which
yeah,
is weird because it's like it's versus The Shining, which is like in terms of pedigree, like that movie's got pedigree. I
yeah. And it is a tough comparison, other than like the similarity in how the stories are set up. But I really think it's like The Shining ends up being something that is good, but might be a little bit thick for
well,
getting into it. You know, there's a lot that you then have to kind of get into other than the scares, such as like the complicated themes of the movie.
that's the thing because we're trying to recommend the better film here, and like The Shining is a great film, and I love The Thing. I think it's a masterpiece. But like it comes to you. You came in with The Shining. You already know my opinion. And
Yeah,
you're the one who's kind of has to make the choice for the audience here. In terms of horror film, which one do you think is the better flick?
I mean I think I stated earlier, but I still think it's The Thing, just because while The Shining, again, it makes you, like you said, or like we said earlier, it's uncomfortable from the start and throughout the movie and has some great scares. I still think there's a level to which the story will kind of wrap you up more than the scares. And if you're really looking for the horror film here, it's The Thing, because the amount to which I squirm when I watch this movie is it's fun. You know, you have fun squirming when you watch these movies, and in a day and age where we don't really get a whole lot of squirmy horror anymore.
We've become
um
desensitized, my friend. That's what's happened.
yeah, I need to explore more of Ari Aster, because I know he's kind of getting there, but I really think that that kind of horror needs to make a breakthrough again, because I'm tired of all these jump scares.
Oh, jump scares need to stop. I'm starting to like I love horror movies, but I'm starting to get a little worn out by jump scares. My heart can't take it anymore.
Yeah, they're good, but just too much.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
You dial it back a little bit. And if you're, somebody who's not a big fan of jump scares, not a big fan of things jumping out with a really loud ass musical sting, watch The Thing. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
Man, like
Well,
we got some good fucking movies this week.
yeah,
I'm-
I mean, this was a really good wrap up to our little horror movie month, which is unfortunately over.
I know. I'm a big horror movie guy, so we'll get a few more sprinkled in for the rest of the year and next year to come, but the marathon is coming to an end.
Yes. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. And
And
next month,
yeah, we say the horror movies are over, but the horror show is not necessarily over because we are doing a little bit of a political sideshow.
just a little bit.
Obviously, it's kind of a big thing happening on November 3rd. I don't know if you've heard about it. I don't know if anybody in the news has been talking
Oh
about
no,
it.
I've been avoiding, the radio, the internet, television, the blimp outside. I've been ignoring all that stuff.
Well, some would call you fortunate.
Yeah.
But we're going to do a little bit of a exploration of,
Some political comedies,
yeah, some movies that appreciate American politics for some reason, or at least appreciate this wonderful country we all live in. Particularly next week, we'll be watching Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and The American President, which is interesting. You wouldn't think these movies kind of pair up, but you end up finding a lot of appreciation for both and how they view the formation of our government.
Yeah. We have, because they're both they're both comedies. They both have fun with the idea of politics, which I think we kind of need. And also we have a new director entering the fray of Frank Capra, who directs Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, who is a very good director. We're going to have fun talking about him. And we also have the return of Aaron Sorkin, who wrote for All the President's Men, or not All the President's Men,
well, on this it'll be returned from Moneyball.
That's right, it'll be returned from Moneyball.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that is double feature for this week. Dean, why don't you tell them where they can find us?
Well, you can always find us on our Instagram page at _podcast on Instagram. Please follow us there. We post new movie posters, movie trivia, and a bunch of other fun stuff. You can also find us on our YouTube channel, which, David, what's on our YouTube channel this week?
Our YouTube channel is In the Frame.
Mm-hmm. And other than that, you can find me on our sister podcast, I guess. It's the other podcast I do called The Film Club. You can probably find a link somewhere. And David, is there anything else we'd like to throw out there before we wrap up for tonight?
Trick or treat. Smell my feet. Give me something good to eat. I don't know.
But of course.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right.
that's the end.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
That's the end of our double feature picture show. Happy Halloween. Stay scared. Peace.
Peace.